Okay. We're calling this meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission to order. The first item is we need a roll call. Okay. Who's going to do the roll call for us, please?
Mr. Chairman, Erasmo Villarreal.
Present.
Jose Reyes.
Present.
Carlos Flores.
Present.
Raúl Gallo.
Present.
Ariel Conca. Johnny Narvaez. Present. Daniel Lopez. Jorge Dominguez. And Director Yuki.
We do have a quorum. Thank you. The next item is everybody could please stand is for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The first item that we're going to discuss at this workshop is discussion with possible action regarding amending the Laredo Land Development Code of the City of Laredo by revising Article 4, Section 24.65.0, General Supplemental Provisions, Provision A, Residential, to allow tractor trailers and certain trailers to park in residential zoning districts with a parking permit. All right, who is going to make the presentation on this? Or what does staff have, or what?
So we have the ordinance that was last updated, so you can see the update that was made, and we have what is current. Go ahead. That's what's current in the ordinance that was last.
Which one's the current one?
This is
The one I thought.
Yeah, utility trade.
I have extras in case.
Kids has-
Just a quick question.
Yes,
Are
sir.
we only looking at 24.65.0? What's in the box?
Yes.
Is that all we're looking
A
at?
is
That's
what's in
it.
the box.
Just on the residential. All right, I guess the thing I'm gonna ask staff right now is, what conditions have prompted, anyone to request a change from this particular ordinance? Is there a petition out there, or is there, I mean, what is the nature of the request for the change?
It was brought out to the city council. There was a resident that went up there. It was brought on, I believe it was by George Alga, that they wanted to change it with permit. So to go back to allow residential areas with only the tractors to be parked inside the property with permits.
Okay,
Was it the, I'm sorry,
go right ahead.
was it the resident that requested it, or was it George Alva, or was it both?
George was the one who put it on the agenda.
For us to consider? Did they give a reason why they wanted this?
Okay.
Well, I mean, without a reason for doing it,
Well, maybe
why are we
Mr. Brad
considering it?
can share some information that, On the request for the change, Mr. Bratton, staff was explaining to us right now that it was basically one resident that approached city council member and asked for the change. Is that pretty much,
Yeah, but it came up at the council meeting, and the council kind of said, we want to look at potential options
okay?
for allowing these vehicles back into the neighborhoods.
Okay. Do you have any proposals on what to do?
The only thing that came up that might be complicated but possible would be some kind of a permitting system where if, for example, I own a tractor and I want to park it in an R1 or residential area, then I would have to have a permit to do something like that. And then that property would need to be inspected to make sure that it's of adequate size and to allow the vehicle to be parked without, being at all in the right of way. That's one of the, the thing that comes to mind. The issue really is how do you enforce it? And how do you enforce what we currently have as a prohibition? I mean, I've driven several neighborhoods and there's 18-wheelers parked, tractors are parked in the neighborhoods. So the enforcement issue is sort of a side issue or a different issue. But in either event, whether you allow them partially or under permit or not, the whole bottom line is, are we able to enforce and make sure that they're behaving themselves, if you will? The other issue is that from a public works perspective, although I don't see Mr. Orfila here, possibly from utilities is, with these things now going into the lots, they're crossing over water lines and sewer lines. And I don't know, what the stress test is for that. Are we gonna have issues with these things breaking and
Well, the meters.
cracking and the meters and so
Meter
forth?
box.
So there's gonna be that kind of an issue. And then, of course, we recently, I think are all aware that the local street standards have been reduced substantially based on axle counts and easel counts and so forth. And in the newer subdivisions that will be built, it is not, really recognized that they're going to be carrying these heavier vehicles, and so they're not being built to any standard that would
It
would allow them to last longer.
Yeah.
Their lifespan of 10 or 12 years, whatever it is. So you've got that issue as well. In the older sections of town, those streets are, a lot of them haven't seen any attention. The older residentials haven't seen attention. And so, if we're gonna have, and I don't know how many of these tractors would be brought in, it's, I know that in the neighborhood I looked at, there were at least 3 or 4. And so I don't know how much more traffic and how much more weight that's going to add to those streets and what kind of damage they may or may not cause. I don't have the technical expertise to opine as to that, but it does raise that question. So if they're allowed back in, I guess you can limit them by the number of permits you issue. That may be one thing to do. And like I say, that's going to then impinge upon utilities, and those guys are gonna wanna know, are these things, being parked up on the water meters and cracking those lines? You can have that issue. But we've been asked to explore it and to try to come up with a solution. And the solution may be no. Maybe no, we don't think that's a good idea. And then it's really council's call. But I think the commission should weigh in on it and have that dialogue. So that we have a good faith effort in honoring that request.
What's the average length of a tractor right now? About 20 feet?
The cab, the tractor, yeah, there's somewhere around 20 feet, I would imagine.
About 20 feet. our front setbacks for any property right now, unless they're staggered setbacks, is 20 feet.
Exactly.
So that puts you right at the edge of the right-of-way.
It does.
All right, what's the turning radius? Most of these lots are probably 6 feet wide. And maybe I ought to call up traffic to answer this one.
What I can do is, let me see if I have one here. Let's see here. Let's see if I can find this. Go ahead.
Let me
If I
go
find
ahead and
this,
call
I'll
up
jump in.
Riazol Mia from Utilities. I have a question for Utilities right now.
I knew you would have a question for utilities, and so we asked him to be here.
Sure. Smart man, so he can provide some good answers.
Riazul Mia with Utilities Department, Mr. Chairman.
Riazul, the question I have for you, have you guys had any problems or issues with tractors backing up into properties right now where they're going over your meter boxes and causing damage?
That issue is not just the tractors, because now we're
It's also
seeing
cars.
people are extending driveway, the meters are covered up. And these new automated meters, if it's covered up, we can get the reading. So that's the issue, and the other issue what Mr. Bratton just bring out, these tractor trailers, most of these driveways are probably 3,000 PSI concrete.
Yes.
If you don't have at least 4,000 or 4,500 PSI, it's gonna break the sidewalk. And so who will be responsible to maintain those? And those are some of the issue, I guess, you guys have to look at it and counsel. Definitely, we all live in our residential home, we don't wanna see these tractor trailers in our neighborhood.
Sure. The startup noise of a diesel engine is quite loud. Okay, here's a picture.
This is one I took a couple of mornings ago. This guy's parked in front of his house. I know they're a little bit bad there, but you can kind of see where he is.
He's at the sidewalk.
He's right at these. You're a good photographer.
And you can see the sidewalks right
They
here.
pretty much concreted the whole front now to allow parking the whole yard.
And it's probably a 42 front yard on that.
And you can see those two are probably the meters, the water meter.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Those two spots are probably the water meter, next to the,
These?
yeah.
Those
No,
are trash cans.
No. In that,
Oh, yeah, right here.
yeah.
Yeah, that's water meter right there. There they are.
No,
No,
they're,
it's a drain.
I don't even know where the water meter is on this place.
Well, they're usually on the sides of the lot,
It's under the truck.
because it's usually a Y. And
Could be.
it probably is under the truck, because they're usually on the sides of the lots.
You really can see. Meters are probably right here, maybe. I don't know. But just to give you a look at those back tires where they are in relation to the house.
Well, that's,
So that's kind of like maybe a worst case scenario, or I don't know. But anyway, like I said, this was one I just happened to see when I was
Sure.
driving
and that's,
in my neighborhood, and so I clicked a picture of it early in the morning. And I think that's what you can kind of.
yeah. Mr. Flores, I know
Yeah.
you had a question.
I mean, to me, it's like, why even consider this if there isn't even a reason to change? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not like it's like 10,000 people showed up and said, guys, we have a major critical problem and we need to change the ordinance. You know what I mean? We have like one person.
Yeah.
You know, and then just think of all the logistical issues and then all the financial issues and then all the bureaucracy of having to figure out who gets the permit and then whether they're complying and are they permitted, not permitted. I mean, at least now you know if there's a trailer, a tractor in someone's property, you know they're violating the law and a neighbor can call and complain and then that simplifies the process. I mean,
This
To
is
me, it's
also in the same neighborhood, and this guy just parked by the park.
and then there's children by the
Let me
park.
ask you, Mr. Bratton, I know years ago, the city was looking at purchasing property to create a parking lot for tractor trailers. Did that ever happen?
Not that I'm aware of.
Did never happen?
There
right?
was a bit of discussion about it, but it never happened.
Okay.
I know that it was, let's something that I think Councilmember Alkilt maybe was.
Vera.
Vera
Vera.
was looking at. And then I think Alkilt may have also brought it up.
The George Vera. Okay. Okay, I guess the next question I have is for the building director.
Good afternoon, Victor Linares, Acting Building Director.
Victor, I have a question for you. In terms of the number of citations that your department has issued for tractors parking in residential zones, do you happen to have a number for us, say, for the last 12 months?
No, I actually don't have a number for that. But I do know is that our zoning inspectors do provide citations as needed, but that if it's like a specific high number that itself, that it catches our attention, I wouldn't be able to say that's a fact itself. So I'd pretty much state that for sure, yeah.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Fire department.
Ruben Dominguez, Laredo Fire Department. I spoke to the chief earlier today, and he says that his main concern is they just didn't want the trailers on the street. We looked up the average width we were getting on trailers was 8.5 feet. So we're looking at 17 feet if you were to have one on each side. Now, streets are usually under 32, I guess, around 32, 31. Normal car is gonna take up about 6 feet. So even if you have a car parked on both sides, a truck or a fire engine will still be able to go through. But if you get two of these side by sides, you might not, it's very likely that an engine won't be able to get through. So that's what the fire department's main concern, that we don't want them on the street itself because they're too wide.
Go right ahead.
How many times in the time that you've been with the fire department has this occurred where a fire engine can't get through because they're parked?
And to my personal knowledge, I don't know. But what I can tell you is, if you do allow them on the street, which most likely it's not gonna happen, but then that the probability is gonna go up that that could be an issue.
Okay, hold on. So the ordinance that we have now, does it allow it to be on the street in the neighborhood? No, right. What they're asking to do is for us to allow it inside the property.
Well,
So even if we were to agree with their change, with the proposed change, it wouldn't really matter because they still shouldn't be on the road anyway.
Right, no, and like I said, that was only our concern, that
Okay,
they're on the
alright.
street. The only thing is that I would like to just mention is that they shouldn't be there at all
At
right
all,
now.
yeah.
And you're finding them in the street.
But-
So if people start bringing them in, I would think that the likelihood that you're gonna find more in the street is gonna go up, because you're finding them in the street right now and they shouldn't be there at all.
But you agree with me, right, that it would be easier to enforce keeping the rules we have now because 100% of the time when there's a tractor, when any one of the residential designations that's here in the statute, that it's not supposed to be there. Whereas if you make the change that they're proposing, now it's like an additional step, like, well, do you have a permit, do you not have a permit? It seems like it would complicate it.
Right, no, I agree with you
Yeah,
100%. The
okay.
enforcement is, right now, it's just black and white.
It's easier
So
to do it this way.
Yeah, the trailer should not be there. The other issue comes like, does he have a permit? Where is it? I took it down. It just expired. I mean,
Yeah.
right now, they're just not there. Enforcement is as easy as it's gonna get to enforce it.
I have a question, I guess, for staff. Is this really regulated to, or who can give out these citations? Wouldn't PD be able to give out these citations? Wouldn't even the fire department give these citations?
Technically, yes, because they're ordinance violations, so I think PD has authority to give out violations on ordinance as well as fire.
So if,
But it's all done by,
Pretty much code enforcement in general, PD, community development, the code certification from different departments does allow for parking citations to be issued, yeah, so
Well,
there's a
because-
bigger group, yeah.
for example, when it comes to handicap parking, I know that there's certain people, regular citizens, that are allowed to give out citations when people are parked at the designated handicap parking spaces and they can give out tickets. So why, for something that's not as much of but it's a nuisance, why can't anybody that works for the city give out these citations?
Pretty much with the ordinance, and it's just open abroad. And so from our end, just generally speaking on citations, it's,
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, citations have to be issued by people who are certified.
Correct, yeah.
Code enforcement officers. Not just anyone can issue a citation. Otherwise, the municipal court will throw it out. Okay, so you have to be certified code enforcement
and
before you
respect,
can issue that.
and
Or
respectively,
PD,
yeah.
or PD or a police officer.
There's different departments. There's an array of departments with code enforcement that have that certification.
Yeah.
And so one of the issues, generally speaking, with different departments, just parking violations, just general, that's where different departments kind of just help out. Really, the priority comes a lot with PD and traffic, but yeah, it's pretty much just open to assist where needed.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman. How much are the citations? What are the costs? What are the fines? Are they scaled? You get one, it's one certain cost. If you get two, it's.
I don't have the answer for that. I know generally speaking, citations from building, it's 500, but for parking citations, I'm not.
Parking, they're all
Yeah.
pretty much standard.
Yeah, I'm
The fee goes up if you don't pay it over so much time. I can't tell you what the amount is for a tractor trailer and a residential. But what I did want to mention is, you mentioned PD and fire giving tickets. The only thing I want to bring up is that's an issue of manpower. Right now, we got, for the entire city of Laredo, we have 11 guys that we have on the street Monday through Friday and Saturday. And we get people calling us all the time because the apartment they live in, there's people parked in the fire lane. When we can send somebody, we will, but we're just overwhelmed with the number of people that are calling us. I know it's the same thing for PD. PD only has a certain amount of officers per precinct, and these guys are doing pretty much everything. So if we're overwhelmed now, and then you want to throw something like this into the mix, obviously it's going to make it it's going to be that much more of a burden on basically any city entity.
No, I'm just saying, basically, if you run into an incident, like you go to a call for whatever reason and you show up at a location and right there next to you is the violation. I mean, it's just a matter of filling it out and giving it there. Not necessarily.
I can kind of see it becoming an issue like that, where it's just, we're getting calls nonstop all day, and it's just an issue of not having sufficient manpower.
Fair enough.
So the reason I'm curious about the fee is because maybe they're not high enough. Maybe it's cheaper for them to pay the fee and not pay for parking. So you're having the problem now, it just doesn't make any sense to.
Okay.
I,
I,
can I comment on
There's,
that?
there's
Go right ahead.
there's always the risk factor. I mean, I'm sure you've driven to San Antonio many times, and you'll see people speeding along San Antonio, way over the speed limit. And, DPS, you get popped, those are pretty expensive tickets, but people do it anyway. So what they're really banking on is the fact that there's not enough enforcement out there, and so they're rolling the dice.
Yeah, and I want to comment. I don't think increasing the fine is gonna reduce the violations the same way that capital murder reduces murders. I mean, people do what they're gonna do regardless of the fine. You know what I'm saying? In other words, I don't think that you can craft a punishment strong enough that it would be
deterrent.
preventative, that it would be a deterrent.
Yeah.
It's precisely for what Nathan just said.
Is there anybody here from Public Works? No?
No, we have somebody here from traffic, though.
Really, Mike?
Two of them.
Two from traffic, huh? My question really was, if the city has seen an increase in the number of curbs that have been damaged by tractor trailers going over them into residential areas. And that was, I don't know if traffic has any information on something like that, or if anybody here has any information, Arturo, or anybody from the city staff. I mean, you guys are all out there in the field, you have guys out in the field. Vic, I don't know if you've all seen where there's additional damage being caused on, this weight rolling over the curbs.
Yeah, no,
But I mean, it's a given.
If anything, this is just from just personal experience and just general information. I used to work my summers with TxDOT, and one of the things that I learned with TxDOT, on their right-of-way, their curb is a lot higher than a normal curb. It's 8 inches, and the reason it's that high, because they've had issues before where 18-wheelers pretty much, when they turn over, if it's a 6-inch, they'll crack it and it'll break. And you could even see that pretty much at some intersections, like at Loop 20 and 35, where the curb is broken, but it's because of the 18-wheelers. But I've heard stories on TxDOT's end about that, so it's just a general comment.
You know what, I disagree about the fee being not a deterrent, because these people need to protect their license. They have a CDL license and their insurance goes up if they get those tickets on their.
It's a non-moving violation.
It's a non-moving
so it doesn't
violation.
affect-
It doesn't, yeah,
affect
you're
us.
correct.
Mr. Garcia?
Chairman
you're
Arturo
correct.
Garcia
He's
with
correct.
Community Development. I do have that concern, similar to what Mr. Linares mentioned earlier. We are investing a lot of money in sidewalks in all these neighborhoods that don't have sidewalks. And it is a concern over that, that investment that we're making as a community, limited dollars, and stretching those dollars as much as we can. And we have that concern where, these heavy vehicles will, break those.
Sidewalks.
Yeah, so there is that potential for it. On the code enforcement side, we haven't had any enforcement initiatives targeting any particular areas or neighborhoods. But in the past, there have been complaints, and I did ask 311 to see if they could provide us a report, and we can provide it in a packet.
Thank you.
To the commission, touching base with them to see how many calls we have gone and complaints. Obviously, the noise is a factor always, with the engines
Sure.
being so loud, as you mentioned earlier. And also, of course, the displacement of vehicles. Obviously, they're placing such a large vehicle in the front yard, they're gonna be displacing cars on the sidewalks, and then there's gonna be sidewalks, and that's where CD and PD are gonna be called in to potentially tag some vehicles that have been out there for a few days or something like that, because they haven't been moved.
All right.
So,
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Does anybody else from the commission have any questions for anybody from the city staff? We haven't heard from traffic. Traffic, would you guys want to come up here and share your thoughts on this proposal?
Sure, love to. Robert Eads with the Traffic Department, Mr. Chairman. So, in assessing this, I do want to, I guess, bring up what's the closest to this, I guess. On a residential parking permit program that we currently run right now. We ran it in the Shiloh area where United used to be. I don't know if y'all remember that, International Shiloh.
Yes.
But that does come with some caveats. So part of the caveat is you need to get 67% of the affected area signatures to be able to even have this permit system in place. And so that constitutes an agreement with your neighbors that this will happen. And so, at least from our standpoint, I mean, there's a lot of safety concerns we would probably see. There's a line of sight issue that you probably have seated at the top of this cab. Kids running in the street. I'll give you one more too. Our comprehensive plan has now driven us towards an idea of road dieting. And so road dieting is essentially that is where we're starting to compress our roadways. And so we're gonna be getting tighter on these roadways. And so this is gonna become more and more valuable real estate and building up to the front end of these lots. And so I don't know if we're gonna start working ourselves counterproductive in this idea because we need as much space as we can just for our normal dealings. When you start to introduce this sort of idea, we were discussing right now if the parking permit system is gonna be off-site, off the street. Obviously that's not really our purview once you get off the roadway. When it becomes, our purview is when you actually start having them parked there and they start becoming that nuisance or that issue where you do have, especially line of sight or access issues for the vehicles that are trying to go through. So, if there's any questions for us?
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Eads? On traffic? No? Thank you, Mr. Eads. Thank you. Is there anybody else from the city here who would like to come up and address the commission with issues? Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, sir. Joe Martinez from Solid Waste Department. One of the concerns that it would be the safety. We have a lot of children, and with time, you have a lot of these tractors, on their lots or the side of the street. It will create a problem. And as a supervisor, we go through the streets and stuff like that, and the garbage trucks barely fit through the streets because most of them are kind of narrow.
Yeah.
And we already have problems with the cul-de-sacs, you know, getting into them. Because a lot of the cars parked, you know, facing the house, they don't go in their yard. We already have that problem. So even giving permits will, you know, create a problem in the long run, you know, for us as picking up the trash, you know,
Okay.
pretty much.
All right,
Thank you.
thank you for your comment. Anybody else from city staff?
Deputy Chief Gonzalez, Laredo Police Department, Ricardo Gonzalez. There's a couple of things to consider. First of all, these vehicles are oversized. They're not designed to have the visibility in a small, narrow street versus commercial roadways. So that's another factor to consider. One of these vehicles striking a human or another vehicle because of the turning radius is going to create a lot of problems. A lot of problems that get stuck. We have to send out personnel to assist these getting vehicles out of the way just to get out of their property. Noise nuisance is another one. Truck drivers they depart at all hours of the day. Sometimes they have to depart at 3 in the morning. They get that engine running and we get deployed. By the time that we arrive there, of course, it's hard to enforce noise nuisance laws because the person is no longer there. We don't have any evidence to support the citation. And we just leave people upset, and it's going to be a periodic problem. So those are the things to consider. Of course, the stress on the roads, the sidewalks, we see it all the time. You can see driveways where commercial vehicles or overweight vehicles go through. They are cracked. They create a lot of stress on the infrastructure. I know the thing is to support a lot of the industry here in town, but this is just going to create more problems than solutions. As it is, as you can tell from the photographs, we have several ways to enforce it. Officers being proactive. A lot of the time, the calls do not allow for the officers to be proactive out there. We do have address all the calls to the 311 system. We have a special ordinance unit that follows up for these complaints. You also have the parking and ordinance divisions that can enforce these violations, but yet it's still not enough. People still try to get away with it. They get cited and so forth. And you probably don't see it reoccurring, but as it is, there's too much of the demand for drivers or cell phone operators that problem will go away, but another one will pop up.
Okay.
And again, the other one is, right now, it's very simple to address. Nobody should be there, period. So when somebody complains, we go, we address it, and we move on. When you have a permit system in place, not only the infrastructure and system to create that, as you were saying, Mr. Flores, but also to determine who has a permit, has it expired, and all these other training issues, and sometimes going out in the middle of the night or late at night or early in the morning, people are asleep because of the hours that they work. It can be done, but again, it's going to demand more resources to properly address it.
Any questions for the chief?
I have a comment, but go ahead.
Okay, thank you, chief.
I just have a comment, when they turn on these tractors in the morning, some of them have what they call blow-by, it's a lot of that bad smoke comes out. So that might be another problem, that families living around there would have. Just a comment.
Yes.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I think the burden on providing storage space for these vehicles should be on the industry and not on the city of Laredo having to enforce permits in their neighborhoods. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Sure.
they're putting the burden now on the citizens through the enforcement department, if we were to go in the direction that they're asking for. So I just think it doesn't make any sense.
Anybody else that would like to comment? Yes.
Sorry, I was supposed to answer one. I believe it was you, Mr. Villarreal, or Mr. Valdez, that you asked about the fine for parking in a residential area is $65.
Thank you. Okay. Anybody else would like anything else to add to the discussion?
A couple of those are marked.
Okay. All right. We've heard the input from the city staff. What does the commission wish to do with this item?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those against, the motion carries. Thank you. All right, the next item that we have on the agenda
Can we turn off the,
is the city council agenda.
City council agenda.
Póntela tú.
Viva Laredo.
The next item is discussion and possible action regarding the Viva Laredo City of Laredo Comprehensive Plan. I want to thank all the city staff who made time to come down here to this workshop. We appreciate all your input, and we want to thank you for participating in this workshop. Thank you all. You're free to stay for the comprehensive plan review if you want.
So interesting. You're free to hang around for the nerd stuff.
sorry.
God, you thought you were gonna get away with it. You're stuck with us, amiguito.
It's actually my pleasure.
Good.
I spent all weekend writing questions.
Yeah. Laser good guy. Ese es Armando. Ese, sí, el Armando.
Oh, that's right, he put the doctor's office.
Yeah.
On the board, yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
Yeah. Alguien lo quitó. Lo quitó. No idea.
My friend Charlie,
No.
Charlie Brown.
Oh, you don't.
Hey, you know, in the ports, the seaports, they have private docking stations, right? They charge boat owners for docking their boats. I don't know if it's feasible or how much money you can make, right? If you have a commercial lot and you just charge for parking.
You can. The city tried it. The thing is, they would have spent buku bucks to buy prime land right off of the mines road. And then it became an issue.
Parking lot.
Okay, well, who's gonna secure my truck at night? You know, and if I get in at 3 o'clock in the morning, who's gonna let me in? So now you're talking about you have to have 24-hour security. That's cost. Who's gonna, and the lights and the pavement. So it became an issue that it's a good idea, but it's a costly issue. And how many are you gonna get to be able to, you know, make the thing work? And we tried that twice. We tried that once in the south, and then the other one, Vera brought it up over here on the Munch Road. But it's a tough issue. Really, the ones that get impacted the most are independent drivers, not the ones that drive for companies, because those.
Yeah, parking lot, parking lot. At the lot, the yard.
All right, is Mr. Bratton bringing a map, or what is he doing? Yes? Okay. Busted him, huh? It probably would be easier for us just to get around the table and look at who's at the table.
We have a table? Okay, so you do that. So what we're gonna do is we're going to spread these maps out here for y'all to come down, look at the maps. One on this table, one on this table, and then we can talk about
I agree.
the area that we're
Producer's
using.
ready to do it.
I don't wanna hold them up, I mean, you know, it's not a boxing match or anything like that.
What are we, I guess, what are we doing?
You're looking at the future land use plan, how it's currently laid out, so that once you see it, then we can talk about why there are issues or whether or not you think there are issues. I think there are issues, but maybe I'm the only one that thinks that. other folks may think there's no problem.
And what quadrant or what area were we
Well, right now,
starting today?
we brought you.
Oh, that's the entire map.
This is the current one.
Let's go down there now.
Let's go down. This was the one from. Here's the future.
Probably easier if we could all just get on one desk.
And then here's a blow up. The area we thought would be a good area to kind of start with, which is northwest. Okay? So we can lay these out here. And we can do this sort of as a workshop kind of thing. I wish we had better tables, but we don't. We got what we got. So here's what it used to look like. This is what it used to look like. Before the master plan.
Give it to my kids that like to do.
Okay? All right, Commissioner Flores, you have the floor.
Yeah, okay, so, in talking to Nathan a little bit, I think that, and it's not something that we really covered today, because we're looking at the area near the Mines Road area, in that undeveloped area. But, one issue that comes up is that in areas of the city that are residential and affluent, those communities have more political sway in terms of the kind of choices that the city council will make when they vary or they deviate from the zoning ordinances. And communities that are less organized or less powerful have less sway over those political decisions. So one way of sort of creating a balance is to go back to something that we had recommended in the comp plan notes that we sent to city council that was approved, which is to talk about developing neighborhood associations in these areas. And so what I would like to do is include in our next agenda to have Nathan and the staff talk to us about what other cities have done, like McAllen and El Paso, that have created neighborhood associations and have even a department that helps neighborhoods to come up with organizing themselves. So what I would like to do is in our next workshop meeting, not P&Z meeting, but workshop meeting for the comp plan, to bring that up as part of, and it doesn't necessarily have to be in the next one, but in one of them, maybe the next one, to begin to have that conversation about what we can do to sort of put that kind of political pressure on city council to make sure that when they are making deviations from the zoning or from the comp plan designations, that the communities are more empowered in understanding what those changes are gonna mean to their neighborhoods. And in my view, one way of doing that, and that other cities have done to equalize the political power, is to create neighborhood associations and to have a department that oversees the creation of those neighborhood associations. So I would like, just for discussion's sake, to have that put onto our next agenda item for in the workshop.
You know, I don't disagree with you. I think it's something that we need to talk about, but I think what we need to get through first is the plan. You know, once we can, figure out exactly the uses, the future land use plan, and once we can all say, okay, I think we've got it, where this kind of works, I think that's the next step. I agree with you. We need to explore that and say,
And I'm fine
okay.
with that. It doesn't matter when it comes up.
But I think that, to me, I think that what we need to do is let's try to get through the land use and kind of figure out that everything is, gonna fit and work for the future. And then after we get through that, then I think we need to go ahead and start looking at other aspects on how to control the land use and the appropriate growth of the city. If
That
that's
sounds
okay.
good. That sounds good.
Okay? So at this point, we just need a motion, I guess, to close this workshop and,
Motion to adjourn.
there we go. Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
And then I guess we'll, at our next P and Z meeting, I guess we can discuss when you guys want to get together again to have another workshop. Is that good?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you all. I want to thank city staff for sticking around.